In the darkest nights, we find our light. Battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Oh, surviving together, victorious, never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you.
Hey, everyone. How you doing tonight? Yes, I am back in my office. You've landed at Surviving Together, a safe space for trauma survivors to connect and build community on their healing journey, as well as providing trauma-related education for all. I know that I hit the live button a few seconds early, so I'm sure that our chat will filter in as they discover that I am actually live, and because it's only 6:01. I'm actually on time. I'm very proud of myself. But we have a wonderful guest here today. So without further ado, I'm not going to get into any other type of intro stuff. I want to bring on Mike Domitrz. And I have to say, Mike, thank you so much for spelling that phonetically on your LinkedIn because it looks, I have to ask, do you have a Polish last name like I do?
That's right. Exactly right. Yes.
All right, let's go. I get mispronounced all the time, so I 100% understand. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. Mike is here to talk to us about how to talk to our kids about those tough topics. I mean, it may not be tough for you or for me because we've been talking about this type of content for so long, but for a lot of parents, talking about their teenagers and their bodies and about dating and consent, and I know bystander intervention and survivor support, for sexual assault victims is something that you get into as well. And these are uncomfortable topics for a lot of parents, right? But B, I think a lot of people just don't even know what to say. So that's, the twofold goal for talking to you today is to talk talk about how do parents talk to their kids, and how do they get them comfortable enough to do, and what should they be saying.
Yeah.
So first off, just go ahead and introduce yourself and who you are and kind of how you got into this field of talking. Because Mike you've been talking what for like 25 years in this space?
We're in around 35 years now. Yeah. Hard to
Oh
believe.
my
Time flies.
gosh. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So for me, this mission is very personal. When I was 19 years old, which is 36 years ago, I was a college student and I received a phone call. And at that time, and I still do, I have 3 older sisters. And the phone call was from my mom. And for me, the youngest of my older sisters had been raped. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now, keep in mind, this is 1989. So the only thing you ever heard about sexual assault or rape in 1989 was a news story or some horror movie where somebody jumped out of an alley or a park. That's pretty much all was ever heard. It was not discussed in high school, was rarely discussed on college campuses even. So
Stranger danger, right?
Right. That was it.
We were afraid of the Econo van and the guy with candy.
That's right. Exactly. So this wasn't, there's a lot of feelings hit me at that time of confusion, of anger, of just so many protection, all these things you wanted to do that you couldn't. And what would happen is I would transfer universities because I wanted to be close to home because he was
Mhm.
caught. There was going to be a trial, and I
Oh,
wanted to be,
wow.
yeah, I wanted to be near my sister and my family, and I wanted to be there for the. I just knew I was struggling too much where I was. I needed to be home, so I
Mhm.
transferred. And the next semester, I was an athlete in college, and we were required to go hear a speaker, and that was the first time I ever heard somebody talk about sexual assault. And while I was sitting
Wow.
there,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is, within a year of my sister's being assaulted. And as I sat there, my teammates, the speaker made a comment like, everybody knows a survivor, you just might not know it. And my teammates were like, I don't know a survivor, I don't know a survivor. And my teammates knew my sister, right? But they didn't know, right? So I was sitting
Yeah.
there going, oh, they don't realize how much this happens. And so that was my wake up call. And hearing the speaker, I thought, wait, I could do something about this. So at that time, I went to the speaker and said, I want to do this. And he said, oh, people say that all the time, but actually show up and I'll give you what I got. Well, I got lucky. This national speaker lived an hour from the campus. And I went there and he said, no one ever shows up. And so I spent a day with him and I designed a program to go into high schools and classrooms. So when I was 2021, I started speaking out on this. And don't get me wrong, I've been doing this full time the whole way. That was a rough road there for that
Yeah.
first decade or so. But since 2002, this is what I've been doing, traveling the world, working in middle schools, high schools, universities, a lot of U.S. military. We've been on 5 of the continents for the U.S. military, doing this work, and even organizations. It's called, in schools, it's called Safer Choices. Everywhere else it's called Can I Kiss You? Really built on consent, respect, boundaries, bystander intervention, and survivor support.
That is just incredible. I mean, that that you took up the mantle of this, right? For your sister, I think is just an incredible thing because the guy's right. I mean, how many people back then are going to show up? And especially for somebody who is just a survivor support person, not the survivor themselves, that's where we had a lot of the stories coming out.
Well,
And
so it's interesting because for me, I didn't think of it that way. Like, I want to be very clear. I wasn't going, well, I'm the survivor support person. I was simply going, I'm hurting from what happened to my sister. This is something I can do to make a difference, is where my brain was going, honestly, at the time,
Mhm.
that I could do to make a difference. And then when I looked at it, the topic, when my sister was, when the case came forward and I could see what this person was charged with doing to my sister, I had to go to the library and look up what this was because we weren't taught these kind of details.
No.
And when I went to the library and I read consent, and I went, well, geez, by reading this, you think you'd have to ask, but nobody asked. So I went to my friends. I said, do you ask? They're like, of course I don't ask. And then my other friends, who typically, in that time, very heteronormative world, people didn't talk about partners or they, he or she, unfortunately. Now we
Right.
do, thankfully, but we didn't back then. And so you'd speak to women and they'd go, have you been asked? And they'd be like, well, of course not. Who asked? Right. So everybody was on this parallel of, you just go for it. And then if you don't like it, you try to stop it. If you can, right?
Mhm.
Try to stop it. You say no. This was the norm, that people just did things to people's bodies without. And I had a big wake up call of, wait, this is what I was taught too. Now, my parents didn't teach it. Certainly my sisters didn't teach me that, but society did, right?
Yeah.
Movies still were teaching it, to this day are still teaching it. Film taught it. Our friends taught it, right? It's just what you learn by hearing and talking to people. And I realized, wow, we have a world that teaches us to go for it on other people's bodies before knowing if they actually absolutely want it. That was the wake up call.
Well, and back then too, because really the 90s started kind of, at least date rape, became, at least it wasn't just stranger danger, date rape started coming out. And then that was like the only other additive, right, into the
So that
space that
happened
we
in the
heard of.
early 90s. Katie Kessner was the first survivor to be on a major magazine. I've met Katie. Katie's been doing this work for as long as I have. She's
Oh,
been
wow.
been on the forefront, especially with regarding campuses, but also she works with high schools. And Katie was a survivor, one of the first to come forward and tell the story publicly, and to
Mhm.
speak publicly and advocate. And so that was early 90s. And you're right, it was still the story of, as far as what the media caught on to, was this concept of
Mhm.
date rape. Right?
Yep.
And so people then categorized rape, is what they did. By calling it date rape, they actually started to categorize what rapes were serious and what rapes weren't. So you would hear people go, well, that was just a date rape. Notice the language, just a versus a stranger attack. That's rape, right? And so they would do this, which was incredibly harmful. Imagine being a survivor and somebody diminishing what happened to you based on these labels society had created.
Well, and during that time as well, the idea of consent really was, unless you verbally said no, then you gave your consent.
Oh, yeah.
You really had to verbally. Did you scream? I mean,
I say it was way more than verbal. That's right. Even if you
did
said
you
no,
scream?
they'd
Did
say,
you fight?
scream? Did you fight? Yes. That it was all of that. And this was part of the problem, that we were putting all the onus on the victim when the crime was taking place, not on the criminal to not commit the crime. And by the way, it's still happening. Not as bad. We've had improvement in that area, but it's still happening that the onus is on often the victim. Now, we refer to somebody as a survivor in our line of work, but criminally, it's a victim and a perpetrator.
Right.
To understand that. And so, yes, there's still a lot of that going on, putting the onus on. I'll prove it to you real quick. And it's this way. Anybody watching this can fill in the following sentences. In the 90s, when we started discussing this, the messaging out there everywhere was no means no. Everybody yells that. They know the answer. And then about 10 years ago, they realized, well, that's not good. Let's switch. Yes means, and it became yes. Both of them were still blaming the survivor because they were both based on responses the survivor must give for there to be something present. But here's the wild part, Rady, to a question the survivor was never being asked.
Yeah.
So nobody's asking you, but we're telling you yes means yes and no means no to a question nobody's asking. Think
And
about
nobody's viewing the perpetrator. Yeah, no one's viewing the perpetrator's behavior.
No.
And putting any responsibility on the perpetrator to control their own actions.
Yeah, 25, we created a t-shirt for our high school programs over 2 decades ago that said, do you ask? And I always said that should have been the 3-word motto all along. Never should have been no means no, yes means yes. Do you ask puts it on the person taking the action to be responsible. Did you have the consent before it took place? So do you ask and do you respect the answer, right? Both of those are critical to this conversation. But parents would say all the time, now remember, no means no, yes means yes. You know what parents weren't saying? Hey, remember to ask before you do anything. Make sure you respect the answer. So it didn't make sense. People were being told this no means yes, yes means yes, without ever being given a choice in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And that consent that consent can be withdrawn.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's another idea that's kind of evolved as we've grown as a society, that we've become aware that, listen, at any point consent can be withdrawn, and that it's on the onus is on the other person to respect that.
Absolutely. Well, and the problem is that wasn't well defined early on. And so people still struggle to define it. And so in education, it's confusing, unfortunately. I'll give you an example. There were people that were using the FRIES acronyms, very common and used often in education. The FRIES acronym stands for FRIES for consent, freely given, right? And then revocable would be idea, or removable for the R. But many people used reversible. I'll come back to why that was very problematic. All right. Then the I was informed, right? That's good. You need informed consent. And then the E was enthusiastic. The S was specific. So if I say, can I kiss you? And you say, yes, I don't get to do all these other things to you. It's not what you agreed to.
Right.
So that was FRIES, right? Made sense. But let's go back to the R. When people were using the word reversible, it was actually doing harm to the movement to stop sexual assault. Because here's what would happen. Let's say we have 2 people named Jordan and Aaron, right? And they both say yes, full consent, fully aware, of age to consent. They fully consent. It's 10 p.m. They start doing what they consented to. At 10:10, Aaron says stop. Jesse stops. Okay, by all means, that was a healthy example. Someone says stop. But people who believed it was reversible believed that when they said stop at 10:10, that means you never had consent for the last 10 minutes, because I reversed my consent. I went back in time. That reverse means we go back. That's what it means. So it was
Beginning.
harmful, right? So then people go, well, see, they're just changing their mind, and they were using it to criticize consent education versus
Yeah.
say it's removable, which means the second you say stop, the consent no longer exists. It doesn't reverse what happened the first 10 minutes. You had consent, but it stopped it in its tracks the second you said stop or no. It's been removed, it's been revoked. Those are healthy examples, but reversible was very confusing and still problematic.
Well, and you often would hear, I know at least because I graduated from high school in 1990 and started college that fall. So, this is definitely right within my
Yeah.
time zone. And that you would hear all the time, especially once this concept of date rape got going. It's like, oh, well, she just regretted it the next
Yeah.
morning.
Yep.
Right.
So we talk about this a
And
lot. Regret is a very different thing than sexual assault. Now, can regret exist within sexual assault? Yes, it can, but it is not sexual assault. They're very different things. And here's the way I explain it to people, especially if you're with an adult audience. I can say to parents, have you both consented to sex and regretted it? And anybody who's been in a long-term relationship or married says, of course I have. Like, you've both looked at each other and went, want to do this? It was like, sure. And then afterwards you're like, yeah, why'd we do that? Yeah, I'm not so sure why we did that either. We weren't really that into it, right? So afterwards you're like, yeah, that was, no, I regret that. That was not the best. But nothing about it was sexual assault. You regretted an experience that you had that you wish you hadn't had. Totally different than sexual assault, right? So what they did in those cases to blame victims, where you're referring to, is they go, well, she's just, and they'd always be a she, right? They would use, once again, what we talked about. She's just regretting it the next morning, when actually what's happening is she's waking up and recognizing what happened last night, and therefore recognizing the crime that was committed. And so the reason the next morning is when they realize is because if there was alcohol or other drugs involved, and they weren't even conscientious of what was taking place the night before, they can't recognize the crime until that's able to occur. But people use that against survivors, unfortunately, instead of recognizing that just proved how messed up the crime was the predator committed. The person didn't even know till the next morning what took place, if they're even sure the next morning, right? There can be a lot of questions about what happened to me, to be fair to the survivor. So they would use that against survivors, is what you would see. They'd also use, because alcohol, drugs, and trauma of a sexual crime, they'd use a survivor changing their story, is what they would say. But what's happening is the survivor's getting recall of memory at different times to what took place. Anybody who understands psychology and crime knows this is common, but it was used against survivors in sexual assault, and still is. Unfortunately, they'd go, oh, well, a week later, we heard this version. A month. Yes, because memories are coming back that weren't present at the time. And that is very normal in psychology.
Well, and in trauma survivors, often very common, because our brain shuts down all our functions that aren't needed when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Or fawn,
And so
right? Yeah.
yeah, fawn, and I think there's two other ones that they've classified now as well. But that when you're in that mode, your brain doesn't put things in order when you start remembering things.
Yep.
So it's so logical that, yes, your story changes. And, well, you didn't tell us that the first time, or you said this happened and then this happened, and now you're saying it's the reverse order or something like that. And I can't tell you how many, trials that I sat through when I was doing victim advocate work, where, the survivor would just be destroyed on the stand for her inconsistent statements, right?
Yep.
And then you've got the person trying to remember the correct way things went, or how they were at least remembering at that moment, and just get totally flustered and totally confused. And it just gave the media would latch onto this. Oh, it's just a he said she said case, right?
Yeah. So let's
That
pause
was
on that phrase, because this is a
big
really important
tagline.
phrase. Yeah. So let's go with he said, she said. Isn't that fascinating? It's always he first. So it's he said, she said, which is fascinating because it's actually not what takes place. If we think there's a crime, a person reports a crime. So it's she said, he said. But do you know what psychologically he said, she said does? Makes her look like she's the second voice to come to the scene late to the game. So it's less
Right.
creditable. So he said, this is what happened. And then she said, this is what happened. So psychologically, it actually hurts survivors when people go, he said, she said, and potentially anybody judging a case, because the
Yes.
theory is he said first. Therefore, that's the
Yes.
credible, the first. But also ironic about that is it leaves out he, she, right? It leaves out a lot of problems in there that's problematic. And not only that, but when we do the he said, the she said, she said, there we go. She
He
said,
said by the
right.
seashore.
Yeah. There's a reason that he might be talking more, because always the perpetrator, not always, there's never an always. The high percentage of the time, the perpetrator's talking more, because they're out there defending their story to everybody to make it look like they're not guilty. Where often a survivor's in trauma and trying to recover, and is not. Some survivors are out there speaking loudly. Many are not, though. They're trying to process, they're trying to recover. There's guilt, there's shame our society's done to them. So they're much quieter as a whole compared to the perpetrator defending themselves. So he is out there saying, while her voice is often not represented there.
Well, and it's definitely that public perception, the societal perception was, well, if you're not coming to your own defense, if you're not speaking out about it, then that version must be the more credible.
Yeah, this goes back to
right?
why didn't she come forward right away? Why'd she wait a year, a
Yes.
week, a month, 30 years, right? It all goes to that. But this, I'm going to reverse it a little bit. This is why we have to get into those schools, right? This is why this education, because if we taught everybody in this country and in this world healthy skills and to go to their best self in these moments, we'd have way less of this crime. Tremendous less of this
100%.
crime. But instead, people run from these conversations. And so they just do programming that says, don't rape. And they think it's effective, even though that has never reduced sexual assault from taking place. Don't anything has never worked. Don't do drugs in the 80s. What happened? Drug use went up, right? And that was on TV every day. Don't do drugs. So a don't do has never been effective. What people want is something to do. So if I'm a teenager and you come into my school and you engage me, you really come in at my level and you give me skills that nobody else has taught me. I'm sitting there going, oh, geez, tell me more. Nobody's given me these skills before. I want these skills because I want to do the right thing. But instead, what we're doing is teaching kids with skill sets of fear, shame, and guilt. Don't. And they just walk out going, I hope that never happens to me. I hope that never happens to me, with nothing to do, with no difference to make in this world.
Right. They have absolutely no skills to be able to navigate this world that they're in. And, it's like when we talk about childhood survivors, right? I mean, if you don't give them the skills and the words to explain what is going on, they're not going to know how to talk about it.
That's right.
They're not going to know even how to disclose it. They're not going to know that it's wrong. I do want to focus on like how parents can approach their kids about this, but since we've been on the consent topic, I wanted to talk just a little bit more about that. There was, I distinctly remember, and it finally, I think, I don't know if it was when GHB really came about or what, but drugs and alcohol used to be a defense to
Correct.
sexual assault.
That's right.
And
It was used as a way to get people off from being convicted. Well, they don't remember because they're drunk. They were so drunk they don't remember. Versus, wait, if they were that drunk, how did they know what they were doing? And your perpetrator in this case intentionally got them that drunk or high, helped them get that drunk or high. And so they knew what they were doing to this. But you're right. Back in the day, that was, well, you can't convict them. They chose to get that drunk, right? That would be the argument. Versus, wait, did your person who touched them know they were drinking? Oh, they did. So they knew they were not of sound mind and intentionally commit a crime. Now, why that became pertinent was you can't do that legally in contracts. So that's what allowed it to become forefront to the people. Will give us an example. I'll give you an example. If you went to a car dealership and you tried to buy a car and they knew you were not of sound mind, they cannot legally sell you that car. They can't.
Right.
So if they knew you were inebriated to the point that it's illegal for them to sell you the car. So when people recognize, well, wait, what's happening there? We're holding the one who could be doing the harm responsible because they know the condition of the other person, right? So that's why people ask all the time, why does a drunk person get off? They're not getting off. They didn't commit the crime. If that drunk person leaves that same party and instead of going back to somebody's house and that person harming them, they get in their car and drive drunk and harm someone, they get held responsible because they committed the harm. But in this case, the drunk person is being harmed by another person. That's the difference.
Well, and it was also being used though by perpetrators as a defense and being, oh, I was so drunk, I didn't know what I was doing, Hey, I'm sorry about it, but I can't be held responsible for what I was doing.
Yeah, and that goes back to the drunk driver. You are held responsible if you're doing the
Exactly.
harm. That's the key. If you're
Yes.
doing the harm is the phrase. Because people, well, what if they're both drunk? Is the most common argument you'll get. And
Right.
yeah, you got a messy situation. Nobody can tell you straight out who's going to be responsible legally without the legal system diving into it because it's messy, right? So that's one thing you have to be
very much
honest when you
so.
talk to kids. When they ask questions like that, don't lie and go, well, it's likely going to be that. You don't know. So just say that's messy, which is why we want to intervene before that ever happens.
I think that that is such a welcome message for kids that things aren't always black and white,
Yep.
right? I mean, you may get into situations where you don't know what to do and there isn't a great answer. And, at least when I was always talking to my son, it was like, listen, if there's any hesitation, if there's any question in your mind, don't do it, right?
That's right.
Just step back and just say, well, this just isn't, going to happen.
Yeah. So this is a great example. How drunk somebody is could be gray, a gray area. You're not sure exactly how drunk they are. Consent never is a gray area. And here's why. Because if I have your consent and it meets all the healthy standards of consent, it's obvious. The healthy standards of consent. Ready? So I know you've been drinking. So the second I know you've been drinking, if I don't know you well enough to know your standards of drinking, I can't have consent because I can't guarantee you're of sound mind. Now, if I've known you, we've been together forever, I know that one beer doesn't do that to you. We're good, right? If we're being, we're good. Okay, that's good for that part of sound. You're of sound mind. 2, you're of legal age. Okay. 3, you're enthusiastically giving this, whatever your enthusiasm is. That's a big problem with this topic. People think enthusiasm, my kind of passion I'm bringing right now to the video. Yeah,
yes,
everybody's sexual enthusiasm. That's not a lot of people's sexual enthusiasm, right? So enthusiasm is a word we have to fine tune with people to help understand. That can mean different things to different people, right? It's freely given. It's informed. All that's there means that you asked a question, right? Can I kiss you? Do you want to do this? What would you love to do? You're asking what they want to do, right? That's clear cut consent. So when people go, oh, that's like the gray area of rape. No. There's no gray rape. You could argue the confusing areas of sound mind. That's about the only thing you can argue is arguments of sound mind. But that's on you if you're the one taking the action. Don't do anything if you even question there's a possibility of that.
Exactly.
If you question there's a possibility of enthusiasm, watch. This is what we teach, and every parent can teach their kid. Your partner doesn't look enthusiastic. You say, can I kiss you? And they go, okay. Okay, now a lot of people, that does not look enthusiastic, right? So clarify. Do not try to change their answer. Don't try to make them enthusiastic. Honor where they at. Do this. Oh, it's okay if you don't want to. Notice I'm giving them an out. I'm not trying to say, no, you want this, don't you? Right? Look at the difference versus, oh, it's okay if you don't want to. Now that allows the person to go, oh, thank you, because I'm not that comfortable, right? Or allows the person to go, oh, no, I want to. I've never been asked. So I was uncomfortable with being able to answer, but
I'm nervous, right? I'm nervous. And that's right. Ask, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with this?
Though, right? That's what's beautiful about clarifying. They get to answer on their term, and now you have clarity. But this is why education is so important around this, for parents to teach their kids, schools to teach their kids, because when you give this simple little skill, kids are like, oh my gosh, I can do that. I could easily do that. And I'd feel better, because so many kids are like, I don't want them to say yes just out of pity, because there's a lot of that too, by the way. So this clarifying helps avoid that.
Well, And in and of this, you're also teaching about healthy relationships, right? I mean, and
100%.
when the kids are engaging in this, they're learning how to communicate with somebody. They're learning how to talk to somebody else. And um, I don't know about you, but I was never taught about relationships or what a
Right.
good one or a bad one looks like. I just grew up with my parents screaming at each other. So, I knew that wasn't really healthy. But other than that, I just,
Yeah,
we're
no,
kind
we
of
lived in an
just,
era, and I'm just a little older than you, but we grew up
yeah,
in an era where parents were never taught to have these conversations. Right? It
yeah,
didn't exist, and they were given it from their
exactly.
parents. So they were doing their best, but they didn't know how to they weren't taught to do this. They didn't necessarily have the skills to do it at that time, right?
Yeah, they had
So
no
if we
tools.
learned anything, if now many did not get this, the far majority didn't even get the sex talk with their parents. Most didn't get it, but if they did, that's what they got. They got the sex talk, or they got the biology talk. This is how
Right.
babies are born, and you don't want to create a baby before you're ready. But it was still a baby born talk versus an actual sex ed. Very few people got sex ed, education around sexual decision making. That was very rare in the home, even more
Hmm.
non-existent in the schools. So that's a rare thing. And today, it's still often a rare thing to get that kind of education.
Yeah, in the home, especially.
And in
I
school. So let me
think
explain when I say and in school.
I was
When I'm at university, so I between August 18th and September 8th, I'll do around 20 universities in those 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh,
So
wow.
they're welcome week. They walk in, the kids arrive on
Right.
campus. I'm the first person on some campuses, I'm the first person they hear. On others, it's the second day or the third day. But you
Hmm.
ask those students, how many of you before you got here got an in-depth education on consent from either school or elsewhere? If you got that, yell, yes, I did. If you didn't, yell, no, I didn't. You have out of 1,000 students, you'll hear like 5, yes, I did. 10, yes, I did. Right.
Wow.
Maybe 50 if you get lucky. So even today, what they're telling you is I got an education on it that was so basic, there was no depth to it at all. Right.
Yeah.
Get consent is what they were taught. Get consent, but they never learned skills on how to do it. So what does that mean?
Well, and then we were talking about, I brought up that it was just earlier this year that I was told, and I had no idea that this was the case. I mean, I knew that some school districts were like, abstinence only education, but I didn't realize that some were like, you cannot teach consent in the state.
So it's interesting. We currently have 19 states in the United States, the last I counted, that are abstinence only education. 19 states out of 50. Right now, here's the fascinating part about that. I'm able to speak in those states. I
Hmm.
do speak in some of those states. People go, well, how is that? Well, you can talk about all of this within abstinence if you have to. So here's what I mean by that. If I'm teaching you how to ask for a kiss, it's so that you have the ability to say no.
Hmm.
So the beauty is, if you look at the laws, this fits within no matter where you're coming from. This education fits
Right.
because if you
Yeah.
want abstinence go up, teach kids the ability to have higher boundaries for themselves, higher standards for themselves, teach
Hmm.
them to have a voice and to have a choice. Right, those key words.
100%.
If they all have a voice and a choice, they feel safer to say no. So now abstinence goes
Yes.
up. Right, I have a voice, and you always ask me. You don't try to pressure me. You don't try to push me. You always give me a choice. So abstinence goes up when you educate. It's evident. We see this research everywhere. So when people go, well, I'm not going to talk about it because it might entice. This is a fear parents have. I'm not going to talk to my kids about this because it might entice them. It might. First of all, find me a kid who got more excited by their parents talking to them about something sexual, right? And you bring this up, and I do a lot of parent programs at schools. All the parents start dying laughing. They're like, yeah, that was one of the worst days. Nothing about it was exciting for the kid, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this myth that you're going to entice your kid or you're going to give them thoughts they haven't had. They are a human being in a
Hmm.
highly sexualized world. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Get them on if they get on any social media, you go, they're not allowed on social media. They see it on their friends' phones. They're seeing it on, so
Exactly.
they live in a,
Do
they
you want
live,
it? Do you want them to hear it from you, or do you want them to get their education from their friends
yep,
who got it from who knows where?
or from porn. because that's
Yep.
the other resource, right? So I was just speaking to school the other day. I'm going to be speaking to them in a few months. And they said, hey, we saw this interview. Could you say that quote again? And here's the quote. The guy was asking me, well, how do we help parents who are uncomfortable overcome this? And I say simply this. If you tell me you love your kid, are you willing to be uncomfortable enough to show them that? Like, to tell me you won't talk to your kid about this topic because you're too uncomfortable tells me your kid's not worth being uncomfortable for.
Mm-hmm.
Really? And when you say that, most parents are like, oh, geez. I was operating from fear as a parent in not having the conversation. And what I realized, actually, what I was doing was lack of loving my kid enough without recognizing that. I was letting fear win over the love for my kid. Of course, I want my kid to have this information. Of course. Who else is giving it to him? No one. Well, then it comes to me. I'm not going to let fear dictate that not happening anymore. No way. I'm going to let love lead over fear. So every parent watching this, just think about that. How uncomfortable are you willing to get to show your kid how much you love them? Because that's what this is about at this point. You're going to it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's just part of the equation, and that's okay. That's not
They're
something
gonna hear stuff out there. Yeah, they're gonna hear stuff out there. And wouldn't you rather have them get the correct information, directly from you? And, you know, I know that as my son was educated, and fortunately his friend group was very educated as well, that I mean, they would talk amongst themselves and they would talk to other people, and that's how the education just spreads right
That's right.
from there. I mean, they had a group, their group, one person in the group was a teen, but was being groomed actually. And it was the friends who saw it. And they said,
Yep.
hey, we just don't think this guy's on the up and up. I really don't. And, brought it to my attention because they knew that I worked in this space. And, lo and behold, oh yeah, they were absolutely correct.
Yeah,
And,
this goes back to what we
by
discussed earlier. I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, just them talking to each other, I think is such a wonderful thing. And as you said, a voice and a choice. I love that. I love that tagline because how many of us, grew up not knowing that we could have healthy boundaries, that it was okay to set boundaries for ourselves. Because as we grow up, those boundaries are set by our parents. We're told what to do. We're told, you can't wear that. This is what you've got to eat. Everything's kind of laid out. So to give them autonomy within their own life, and especially then over their own body, is so empowering.
Yes, I'll give you a story that's sad and powerful at the same time.
Mhm.
So about 10 years ago, I'm at a military installation in Japan, and I'm speaking there for multiple days. And so I give my session the one day, and then the next day, somebody comes in who had been in that session the day before. And she said, this was the first time I ever recognized that I was allowed to have a voice, and I've been married for 30 years.
Mm. Oh
And
my
it wasn't that she was in an unhealthy, horrible marriage. People would think that when they hear that. It was that she
right.
never believed that it was her role to have a voice. So maybe even if there were opportunities to have the voice expressed, she didn't feel it was her place to have the voice, right? So that can happen. People don't recognize how much that can happen. You could have a partner who wants you to have a voice, but you're going to sit there and go, not my place internally.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna have that voice. If I have a voice as a woman, that means sexually, that means I'm a slut or I'm a whore. All these concepts that can play back. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna stay in my proper lane and role here as the spouse, right? And to see her after 30 years recognize, wait, that's not the way this should work. I should have a voice.
Mhm.
I'd want my kids to have a voice. So I want to have a voice, right? But to see the light bulb go off, and all people go, well, isn't it a little late to talk to college students? It's never too late to light up light bulbs in people, to recognize what they deserve, what their partners deserve too, by the way, right? They should be the
Right.
good partner in addition to wanting the good partner, right? The healthy partner.
Well, and in speaking to people and having them make these realizations, and when they are empowered to have their boundaries, even if we're just talking to them in regards to the sexual assault realm, I think that gives them that much more confidence and that much more power to keep their boundaries in place for just other types of relationships, to not fall into the vulnerabilities of, love bombing or narcissistic relationships or domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
It just, that type of education has so many more benefits to it, right?
Yeah,
Than
and
just.
it's positive based. It's growth based.
Mhm.
So this goes back to what we discussed earlier. The parent going, hey, before you go out, don't do A, B, C, or D, or F. All right. So what am I supposed to do? Right. So that's like,
Right,
where,
right.
where is the thing that I can do? Right. So, and then the kids realize, well, it sounds like I can't do anything, but my friends, this is where it's powerful. My parents say everything's bad. My friends
Mhm.
tell me it's only good. Well, which one am I more likely going to get curious by then? Both. Because my parents say it's bad and my friends say it's good, I get more curious. Which
Mhm.
is it? So I go to explore, and that doesn't mean in the healthy ways necessarily. So I go to
Yeah.
explore versus if my parents said, hey, it can be horrible, which it can. It can also be
Mhm.
amazing. The question is,
You
do you have
know,
the skill sets to get yourself closer to amazing each time? That's the question, because you deserve for it to be amazing. Now, by the way,
mhm.
no matter what religion you're coming from, that lines up religiously too, because
Mhm.
religions say that it's a gift from God to be treasured, honored, and respected at all times. And the body's a
Mhm.
temple to be treasured, honored, and respected at all times. So this education fits really beautifully. That's why I said earlier when people try to go, well, no, we're going to do abstinence only, right? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, this still fits because
Mhm.
all of that is built on the concept that it's supposed to be something wonderful. So
Right.
let's build something wonderful so the horrible happens less often. And you may be aware, but people like to go, well, that doesn't stop the predator. Most sexual assaults are not committed by the criminal serial predator. That's the
Yeah.
TV version you watch. Most sexual assaults occur by the partner you know, you trust, and they don't have a track record of hunting down people at night. They believe what they're doing is okay, by the way, doesn't excuse it at
Mhm.
all. They're going to be held responsible for the crime. But they
Right.
believe, oh, this is what they want. So I'm going to do this to them. And in no way does this diminish the harm they're doing. But that's what is actually happening when you sit down with usually two people in a case is
Mhm.
one horrifically harmed and the other is often, as you know from your work, clueless to the
Mhm.
harm they caused because nobody sat down and taught these concepts of healthy. They just said don't.
Right. And, you know, I know that we got to let you go in a couple of minutes, and if we could talk about this for hours, and I still have so many more questions for you, but so maybe we'll have you on another time. But one of the things is, because the other thing you mentioned was porn, and this is where kids are going to get things, and as you probably know, porn has been getting more and more violent, rougher and rougher, and if there wasn't an audience for it, it wouldn't be created.
Yep.
And um, if that is the basis for our children learning what's acceptable, um, they're starting off from left
So
field,
that a
right?
lot are learning from porn without a doubt. And they'll tell you this. Students tell me this in schools,
Well,
right?
And
However,
I
to be fair,
before you,
so I was just say Hollywood's just as guilty as porn. If
oh
you
yeah,
look at almost any Hollywood film of passionate sex, they're drinking almost
mm,
always. They're if it's passionate sex, they were first fighting. It's
mm,
amazing how many movie scenes you will watch where they go from a intense argument to passionate sex. And
angry
so
sex, right?
what's that? Angry sex,
Angry
all
sex,
yes,
good sex.
revenge sex, right? All these things, right? And it's called passion, right?
Hmm.
And that's how it's sold. So kids see this and go, "Ooh, that's exciting," versus, "Ooh, wait, you shouldn't need that for it to be exciting." Like, do you know
Hmm.
what it's like to be with somebody you want to be with? That's exciting. Like that's
Yeah,
passionate. But they don't
right.
see that projection, right? So and over again, they see negative toxic versions. Euphoria was a show on HBO that is still known for very unhealthy teen sexual displays. Now people go, well, the
Mhm.
show's showing harm. but teens watching it go, that's sexy. And that's where the danger zone of this balance goes.
And I just want to, because I know we're just about a minute away from letting you go, but to anybody who wonders how important and how effective education in this sort of realm, can be. I'll just give you a quick story from my strength. I did a show on kids on porn, right? Kids were growing up with this and having access to them all the time. My son was 17 at the time, and I went to him before I did the show, and I said, "Hey, listen, I just wanted to get your thoughts. What do you think about porn?" I've been talking to him his entire, teenage life about this, and probably even from before. And he was always such a, "Hey, I got to talk to you." He's like, "Oh, no, not again. What are you going to talk to me
Exactly.
about now?" Yeah, mom's going to talk to me. Um, and I said, "What do you think about this?" And he goes, "Mom, I don't watch that shit. It really fucks with your head." Literally, my jaw dropped. And I said, "Explain. I need you to tell me what are and he was just like, "Well, I know it's not real life, and it's like they don't even look like they're enjoying." So he was picking it apart and not just seeing it as, "Oh, this is sex." He was interpreting what I was saying to him and what healthy is and what that looks like, and going, "This doesn't look like what I've been told." So
So
it's just, you
y-
know?
yeah, here's what's fascinating. When you ask students in an audience, they'll admit it, that they think it's highly unrealistic, but they forget that while they're watching it.
Mhm.
So they know it's harmful. They know it's unhealthy. They don't even argue. They're like, "Yes, it is. And here's why." They can list the reasons, and we watch it. So that's great. You gave a great example there of somebody not watching it because they recognize through the right lens. And that's the key. Seeing it through the right lens is everything
Yeah.
around this topic. Because to tell kids don't watch it, nowadays they're going to run into it. They're going to run. The question is, are they going to see it through the right lens? That's everything
Yes.
about this entire topic, by the way. Are we seeing it through the right lens?
I was just having a conversation with a colleague of mine who was like, "Yeah, my son's 14. No, I haven't talked to him about porn." And I'm just like, "Why?" I'm like, "Do you think he's never seen it?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, he plays video games most of the time and he's on this or whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, let's just be realistic. Come on, let's get base here."
Yep.
And, so I had to sit him down and give him, Porn Talk 101 on how you talk to your kids. But um, I know you got to go, and thank you so much for being here. This is definitely a conversation I would love to continue another time. We didn't have much of a live chat here today because I'm normally on
Right.
Wednesdays versus
Right.
Tuesdays, so it's a different day. So people are probably, even though I let them know, they're like, "Still Wednesday's my
Sure.
day."
Yep,
So
that makes sense.
we'll,
Well, thank you for
yeah,
having me on. That's for sure.
we'll get people on replay, and I'll send you a follow-up email because I know that we were going to talk about some other things as well.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Mike, for being here today. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the comments we have popping in there. By Rick, I appreciate that. So,
Yeah, if
thanks for
people
having
are
me on.
watching and
It's been
lurking
a
in the
great
background.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye. Oh my gosh, guys. I could talk to him for forever. I had probably a 30 to 40-minute conversation with him before this show about a month ago. As I do with anybody who comes on, I always have to do a pre-interview with them. And we didn't even cover, I don't think anything, hardly anything that I actually covered in that conversation because there's just so much to talk about in regards to this field. So I'm definitely going to reach out to him again and see if we can continue this conversation because we really didn't get into too much about how parents can make their kids a little more comfortable with the conversations, how they can make themselves more comfortable with the conversations, and um, what to say to kind of middle schoolers versus high schoolers. The content, like where's that cutoff line? How do I know what's age appropriate to speak to what age group? And so those are definite conversations that I still want to have. As you heard, he also does education to military installations. You guys know that I'm doing my sexual assault in the military series that I'm hoping to launch in May. And I definitely am trying to get Mike to come back for that. He has a very, very busy schedule with his speaking engagements. He's at hundreds of schools throughout the year, all over the country. And as you heard, he even goes to different places around the world. It's just absolutely amazing. If I could be his sidekick and he could just take me along and do what he does and do this channel, I would be the happiest camper alive. I swear, it is. A dream, right? So I do need to see if he's going to be in Michigan, if he's ever here at any of the colleges, or I don't know if he'd be at the high schools here, but there's definitely some colleges he might stop by here, and I'd love to see him in person. As you can tell, he's enthusiastic about it. He's passionate. He's knowledgeable. He's been doing it for such a long time. He's seen it evolve over 35 years in terms of what we're teaching our kids and how we're teaching our kids. So if you guys have any questions for either myself or Mike, you can email me at survivingtogethersass@gmail.com. Mike's contact information is in the video description. He also, I think I did include his link to his book, Can I Kiss You? It's actually been, he's written a whole book about it as well. So it's a great resource for parents to pick up, and young adults who can digest that information. Um, I wouldn't recommend it probably for middle schoolers unless you were going to have somebody kind of guiding them through this content. I've not read the book myself, so that's why I'm kind of a little hesitant on that. But I want to say thank you, Crystal, for being here. Body Illusion, Rick, Indigo. Even if you're catching on the replay, I know this was an off day for me, right? I'm normally here on Wednesdays, and I'm sure even with my announcements, people are like going to be like, "Where's the live tomorrow?" It's not going to have it, guys. I'm going to be stopping by my son's place. I am 100% completely alone in my house. I have no cats. I have no child. It is very weird, I have to say, but I'm certainly really excited for him. The cats have finally come out from underneath the bed, I've heard. So at least, they're doing well. You guys know that we started our human trafficking series on Saturday. We're going to be continuing that. Please look at all the lives that I have scheduled. I have only, believe it or not, I have only one date between now and the end of February that is actually up for grabs for a topic. It's amazing. So we have got so many good speakers coming up, not only for the human trafficking series, but also for just other trauma related talk. So check out the lives, check out the descriptions. I think I've got descriptions up for just about everybody that I've put a thumbnail up for, uh, except for my one opening on February 17th or 11th or something like that. It's just amazing. So with that, I will let you guys all go. I hope you catch it on replay if you are, or if you're still here with me now. If you haven't hit that like button, if you enjoyed what we did to here today, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't. There's going to be a ton of more content coming up over the next few months. And actually, I'm planning on this entire year. You're going to see a lot more guests. That's my goal anyway. And that's where we're working towards, and definitely got it going on for the first couple months. So subscribe, hit the all bell for notifications. If you can comment after the show, that really helps to push this out to as many people as possible, especially this talk. Wow, it just, so many people need to hear this. I think, not only kids, but adults as well, how to talk to your kids about hard topics. And we only covered consent. And I want to talk about bystander intervention and survivor support. How do you be a good support for a survivor, right? two topics that I want to have Mike back on to talk about. So I know that it was either due today or he didn't have availability until May. So that's why we did an off day, and that just tells you about his schedule. So hoping in May that I'll be able to wrangle him in for another talk either about this or and I'm not even going to say and sexual assault in the military topic. I've recently been connected with a survivor of military sexual assault. It's MSA for short. So if you see that in any of the video descriptions, you'll understand what that is. And I'm going to interview her on Sunday, and she's really excited about coming on that series as well. So that will be an awesome series when I get everybody scheduled for it as well. I've almost got all the interviews done for that. So thank you to everybody for your support so far. This channel is now, I need to put up a post. We are now almost 2 years old. I mean, technically, according to YouTube, we're 2 years old, but it was the beginning of February when I had my first live show. So I really consider that my 2-year anniversary. So our 2-year anniversary is coming up in just a couple weeks, guys. Oh my gosh. And I want to send a shout out to my mom. Her birthday is on Friday. Happy, happy birthday, Mom. I love you so much. And I am so glad that you are still a part of my life and for just always being there and supporting me as much as you could with all of the tools that you had available for you at the time. Love you from the bottom of my heart. So happy birthday to Mama Mac. And with that, I'm going to say, remember, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are loved just the way you are for who you are. Hugs and love to me, not to everybody out there. Have a good week. I will see you this Saturday. And I need to remember this Saturday is the 24th. So I don't have a guest scheduled for this Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern. What I'm planning on doing, I just don't have the thumbnail written up yet, is just kind of a mental health check-in, see how everyone's doing. We've covered some tough topics so far this year, and we're going to be covering some harder stuff later on this month and definitely into next month. So just want to do a check-in and see how everyone's doing, maybe bring a few more tips and tricks as to how to be your best you. I'm trying. I'm in a totally new space in my head. I'm not having to worry about no, I shouldn't say that. Not having to worry about my son every day. I always worry about him, but not having him here every day, right? So we're just going to kind of do a check-in on Saturday. That's the plan anyway. If something comes up and I see something come through my feed or on the news that really strikes me, I'll bring that to your attention. But otherwise, I will see you guys regardless. Saturday, 3 p.m. We are standard Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern for now until the end of February at least, because that's what I've got scheduled out. So no more off day lives at this point. So I will see you later, guys. Take care. And I love you. Enjoy the outro. Bye. Surviving together, never alone. If I can get my outro to play. I don't have a mouse.
Through the fire, through the rain, we have walked through endless pain, but we stand, we rise again, stronger now, we break the chains, surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. Every tear, every scar tells the story of who we are. Not just survivors, but warriors too. With love as our armor, we see this through. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. Mm.